Previously, I've done a video on communication, and we teach in Action Coach a phrase that goes, the only true measure of communication is the response you get. And what that means is, if you're not happy or satisfied with the response you get from somebody else, you need to look at your own communication and the way you communicated with them. Because that's the only way to measure how effective you are as a communicator. So I just wanted to take it to the next step and look at, especially during these times where there's quite a lot of stress and tension among the team, and maybe, emotions might be a little bit higher than they normally are. And also, people are thinking differently about their own agendas and their own priorities right now. And that can really damage effective and productive communication between leaders and their team, or between team members themselves. So there's two ways we need to look at communication. First, we need to consider the respect that we have for the other person. Respect meaning you take into account the other person's needs, wants, desires, their point of view. You've got to take that into consideration when you're communicating with other people. But you also need to take into account your own point of view, your own perspective, your own situation, your own needs, wants, and desires. So taking those things into account, we either have a high respect for the other person or a low respect for the other person, and a high self-respect or a low self-respect. Which means there's 4 different quadrants that we can find ourselves in terms of communication. And the first is down here, where we have a low self-respect and a low respect for others, meaning I don't care about anybody else, and I'm a pretty miserable person myself, and so I'm going to destroy this business or destroy this relationship from the inside out. I'm basically just miserable. And that's poisonous in a team, because that kind of attitude spreads throughout the team. You can probably think of somebody, or maybe you've worked with somebody in the past that's had that kind of attitude and communication style. And that's a lose-lose. If I'm going to lose and be miserable, I want to make sure that you're going to lose and be miserable as well. So we call that manipulative aggressive in psychobabble talk, but we just call it something that we can remember it by as I'm not okay and you're not okay. Sounds a little bit silly, but basically that's what we're saying is I'm not going to make sure you're not in a good place either. Second quadrant we can be in is where we have a high self-respect but a low respect for others. So that would be up in here, and that's where it's important that I get what I want. It's important that you listen to me and you take into account where I'm coming from, but I'm not going to listen to you or take into account your perspective or your needs, wants, and desires. I'm not going to listen to you. You're just going to listen to me. And we call that hostile aggressive. It's basically people that have their own agenda and they're not interested in anybody else's agenda. And that's a win-lose. I'm going to win, you're going to lose. That's why it's hostile. And we call that I'm okay, but you're not okay. The third quadrant is where we have a high respect for the other person, but a low self-respect. And what that means is I'm going to do whatever it is that you want. I'm going to go along with you, whatever your views or opinions are. I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do, even at great personal sacrifice, even if I don't believe it. I want to avoid confrontation. I want to avoid an argument. My main goal is just to please other people. And that's a win-lose or a lose-win situation as well, because you're going to win, you're going to get what you want from me, but I'm going to lose because I'm not really bought into it. I don't agree with it, I don't believe in it, but rather than avoid a confrontation, I'm just going to keep it to myself. And that's a lose situation, because it's a lose situation for both of us, really, because you're not going to get the best out of me. I'm not doing what you want with any heart in it or any real energy. I'm giving in. And we call that being passive. You're passive when you give in and just make sure that the other person is getting what they want without your own perspective being heard. So we call that you're okay, I'm not okay. final quadrant, you can see where this is heading, is where we have a high respect for the other person, meaning I'm going to take into account your needs, wants, and desires, your perspective, your point of view, your opinion, but you're also going to hear mine. I'm going to tell you where I'm coming from, you're going to tell me where you're coming from, and then we're going to have a conversation about how to work this out. And we call that being assertive. I think a lot of people kind of misunderstand what the word assertive means, or they confuse it with aggressive. You know, I hear people say all the time, oh, that person's really assertive. You always know where she stands. Well, that's not really what assertive is. Assertive means I'm going to listen to you and understand where you're coming from. And we call that I'm okay, you're okay. Hey, listen, where I'm coming from is worth listening to. I've got a point of view, you're going to hear it, but I know you've got a point of view as well. I'm going to hear it. I'm going to give you the same level of respect that I'm giving myself. We're going to come up with a win-win situation. And that's true assertiveness. When I'm not interested in what you have to say, I'm being aggressive. When I'm not going to share with you what I have to say, I'm being passive. Nobody really wins in that situation. The win-win comes from being assertive. I'm okay, you're okay. So look out in your next conversations with your team members or your colleagues and listen out for, am I really listening to the other person? Am I sharing with them in a non-aggressive way where I'm coming from so that we can have a productive working relationship? Good luck. Get in touch if you want to find out more.